Good afternoon. Happy Thursday. My name is Rob Romanowski. I'm the Director of Sales Operations with 3HTI. And today what we're going to do in our Creo webinar series is take a look at a capability that's already within Creo called the Design Exploration Extension. So without getting into what it does, I'm just going to say this can really save you a lot of time from creating iterations of files and separate files that are unnecessary, as well as being able to manage those files. Everything that you create and ideas and iterations that you could try can stay within the same file. And we like to add value to our webinars. So this capability is something that's already in Creo. You don't have to buy it. If you're already a Creo user, you have this capability. And if you need to know more about it, you can just reach out to us and we can point you in the right direction and help you start using it immediately. So without further ado, Paul Dye, who is a solutions consultant and applications engineer with PTC's Virtual Center of Excellence. He is going to take us through a brief presentation and then give us a live demo of what design exploration does. Paul, you have the con. Take it away, my friend.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Rob, for having me on. And thank you, everybody, for jumping on today. This is, until very recently, it's starting to gain a little bit more traction now, but I'd say one of the most underrated extensions that we have from within Creo. It's something that people don't realize that you have available to you.
I would agree with that.
It really has so many different applications and can be used pretty much in tandem with everything that you're doing from within Creo. Right. So I'm going to go through and explain exactly how we utilize this, what it looks like from within the context of Creo. It's very straightforward. It's not something that requires any training really to get up and running with. Something that you can just start into, build out, and is really going to add a lot of value to your process. So again, I'm going to explain exactly how we're working with this. If you have any questions, feel free to drop that in. And with that, I can go ahead and jump into this and really start with the idea of the challenges that we look at whenever it comes to a design iteration perspective. And starts with the idea of trying out new things, right? Maybe we're thinking of an upgrade to a current design, maybe a new version, maybe you have a more complex design that you want to build into, or you want to make some significant changes to the model, but not exactly sure how you're going to get there. And you might start going through the process of trying out lots of new concepts, just pretty quick fire to see how it might look. And then finally, you get to the point where you say, okay, I have some new ideas that I want to incorporate. But the question becomes, how do you bridge that gap? How do you get from the ideas that you're coming out with and you're trying out to getting to the new official design that you're working with, right? It's all very real challenges. And we see the process looks a little bit strange today, right? You might start by creating a bunch of different backup files for the different iterations that you're trying out. Each different design change might create a new model. It's really a mess. End up having models all over the place, leads you to opening, closing, reloading every single time that you want to view a different design path. Really becomes a nightmare of trying to keep everything straight, especially whenever it comes to a product data management perspective. It really is a lot of lost time that comes into that. And one of the most important things that we don't want to lose is really the value of having multiple different designs that you can go through and build out. Problem is, we don't want to have just a bunch of screenshots of some of the work that we've done, try to capture that history in that way. What we'd really like to have is different model configurations and different versions ready to go. You're doing a design review, for example, and maybe you're doing a design review and decide that you like a certain feature. Well, how hard is it going to be to go back and sift through the different version that you have to find the one design feature that you liked? It's a big issue and eat up a lot of time, and something that really the design exploration extension is very uniquely set up and built out to combat those types of challenges. And the process really involves exploring different design options to your heart's content, but at the same time, keeping track of everything that you've done, not creating all different save files, and just doing it within a clean environment. And this is going to start with the idea of snapshots. You're instantly creating a backup of the Creo session that you're working with whenever you get into a design exploration session. So you're starting with this pre-modified version of the model before you go through and make any changes. And then we capture each of the changes that we make through the use of checkpoints. These are essentially going to be incremental changes that allow us to simultaneously explore many different design ideas that you might have. You then have the ability to toggle between each checkpoint that you're making, and you can branch to wherever you want to go. Gives us some options. You can pick the path that's best for you, and ultimately you can accept those changes. Or if you don't want to, you can say, hey, I actually just want to revert back and try out a different path. But it gives you multiple different ways of actually exploring those different design paths that you're going down. And it really makes the process painless no matter how many paths that you try. So say you're working with a design, you want to go through and add a couple features, and you get a little bit down one path and you say, you know what, this isn't actually really what I want. Well, because you're working in design exploration, you can switch right back to another session that you're working with and say, okay, now we actually want to branch into a different direction based off of an earlier iteration. And you start to go down that path. And then you say, actually, maybe I was right the first time around. Well, that's cool. You just go right back into that one, continue where you left off. And you don't want to be the one that's actually having to go through and keep track of all this in your head, or trying to just keep track of snapshots or screenshots. It's probably how it's normally being done. We can really let the design exploration session and that extension do the work for us. And one thing that I'll mention before I even go through and show anything from a demonstration perspective, this isn't just for design changes. This really plays into multiple different areas. Whether you're doing this for design optimization, if you want to tie this in with what you're doing from an analysis perspective, it works there. So really any of the different areas that you're working with from within Creo, design exploration is really powerful for going through and managing those different design paths that you want to go down. And you don't have to go through and have some completely disparate process that you're doing just for your design sessions and for your design exploration. It can just be done right along with everything else that you're doing within the context of Creo. So again, I can go through and actually show what this looks like from within the context of Creo, probably give a little bit more context and really into what I'm talking about whenever we want to dive into one of these sessions. So for our demonstration here, I'm going to be working with my Polaris snowmobile data set. And right now, I'm just in a pretty standard Creo session. When you get started, I can simply start into a design exploration session. It's just found right down in the file dropdown under manage session that you want to start into. Very easy to get into. Just give it a name, something tied to what we're working with here. In this case, it'll be for our seat design. And once we start into this, you're going to see that you're starting into it with a pre-modified version of this model. So as we go through and make changes, what we're going to do is keep track of all the changes using our different checkpoints along the way. All right, so that's what we can do now. We can go through and try out some different configurations here with the seat design. Maybe we'll start by removing the existing seat with the bar around the back, possibly because we want to make some modifications to the tank or any of the adjacent geometry. All right, so we'll focus up here on our tank, and I'll start by opening up the sketch that we have for our outer surface of the tank. Like I mentioned, you might want to go through and make some changes to the profile or the layout of this tank. Maybe you want to go through and work with some of the dimensions in here, increase the height in a few places. So go ahead and get what we're working with here in that sense. Open that up. And it's really whatever you want to go through and make changes to. It could be making changes to things that you already designed in the past, or making changes or adding in new features. Whatever you want to go through and test out, you really have the freedom to do so from within the exploration session, not making changes to that pre-modified version of the model. We can go ahead and let that run through. And whenever we make that change, you can see that we actually have an outdated feature based upon that. It's using some of our copy geometry. And what you could do once you go through and make those changes is understand the differences as well. So looking at that, you can see exactly what's been changed here. We can say show differences. And it'll highlight in gray what the outdated features were. And then any of the change features will be highlighted in orange there. And then from that point, you could choose to not have those updates go through if you don't like the change. Or if you're fine with it, you can go ahead and update it and let it go through. And the biggest thing to note while I'm doing this is we're really just doing a standard sort of CAD Creo design work. Whatever you're doing, it's nothing different than what you'd be doing in your standard Creo environment. The difference is now is within the exploration session, it's making sure that it's documenting that work that we're doing and taking note of all the changes that we're making. Right, so now I've made a couple of changes to the tank design. I'm going to go ahead and bring in and assemble a new part into the seat design. If I want to get this part assembled in, I'm just going to use some standard Creo assembly mates. Go ahead and take this in. I'm just going to tie this in with the global coordinate system. We'll tie that in with the local coordinate system that we have for that seat. All right, and that's looking pretty good. We have more of a utility version of the snowmobile seat, something that I'm pretty happy with for now. And if I've gone through and made some changes, what I would do then is make a checkpoint for that particular configuration. Just give it a name, and that'll be our driver seat 1. That acts as a very good point to branch from, or simply a spot that I want to reference back to later on, somewhere down the road. And then from that point, we can just keep going. You can go through, work with the model, you can delete parts, you can add in parts or sub-assemblies, make whatever modifications that you might need to. We can see that we have some different boundary blends and surfaces that actually make up this component. What you can go through and do is work with those. You can try some things out, make some changes, and then at any point along the way, just make checkpoints to keep track of what you're doing, what we've done. It's really a lot of what the design exploration is all about, is giving you the chance to be creative in the design by actually documenting everything that you're doing throughout that process as well. So what I want to do actually here is suppress my driver's seat part. And I want to bring in more of a stylized design with this. And the big thing to note while I'm doing this is I'm not doing a file, save as, and creating copies of different folders I have to go and sort through. All we really do here is make checkpoints here in this one streamlined session. Allows me to see the full history of the design. I'll make a checkpoint here since this is a pretty good stopping point. This will be our driver's seat 2. And then we'll keep going on from there. And now we can keep trying things out. There's really not a limit to the amount of changes and different iterations that you can go through and do. So what I'm going to first do in this case is suppress the style surface that I added in, bring in a different version. And really just for the sake of the demonstration, I have some of these different features already built out and I'm just bringing them in. But the idea is that you would normally be able to go through and just do your normal design work, go through and add features, create geometry, whatever you do on a normal day-to-day basis. And then at any point that you feel necessary, when you want to preserve that design history, build out a checkpoint. So now what I have is 3 different seat designs that I can switch between. I can branch off of whatever path I want to go off of there. And again, these aren't different copies of the model, different files that I have to open up and work with, compare the changes, do rework. I don't even really have to accept any of the changes that I'm making. At any point, I could go back right to that pre-modified version of the model and just work back from there. And maybe in this case, I want to try out a different type of path. If I want to do it before we made any of the changes to that seat design, what I actually want to do is build out a passenger seat towards the back end of the snowmobile. So in order to do that, I'll just start by clearing out the frame at the back. And with that, I'm actually going to delete the component. It doesn't make any changes to that pre-modified version that we started with. Really only has an effect in this checkpoint in this specific branch. And it's only going to take effect if I choose to move forward with the design. And now with this, I'll go ahead and bring in a subassembly that I've worked on and just go ahead and assemble that into my design. Again, this could be something that I already have built out, or it could be work that I'm doing right from within the context of the assembly. Just go ahead and bring in some standard Creo assembly mates and sign that right in there. And I think it's looking pretty good. And if we make a pretty big change, again, we'll make a checkpoint at that configuration. It's probably going to be step 1 in my design of that passenger seat. Something that will act as the base for any changes that we're going to make down the line there as well. All right, and what I've started off here is with a little bit more of a shorter design for that seat, but I'm also curious what it would look like if I increase the height of that backrest. So we can go through and make some modifications to that geometry that's already built out. You can actually see that the seat was designed using a freestyle surface. So you can see what it looks like to make some changes there as well. If you've never worked with the freestyle surfaces before, it essentially has these nodes that you're able to push and pull on very quickly to build out this sort of freeform surface geometry, a little bit different than what you would think of for your normal parametric methods that you might be used to. Again, this is another tool that you just have out of the base with Creo as well. So something that you might not work with right now, but is really strong for any type of concepting work that you might want to do. All right, and we let that regenerate back through here. And these are changes that I could go back later on. I could tighten up those dimensions if I really need to. But for now, I just want to get a rough idea, right? I just want to go through and do some design exploration. And now we can accept those changes. We can regenerate the model and see what it looks like back here from within the context of the rest of our assembly. I think it's looking pretty good, but maybe in this case, the taller design doesn't really work well with those handholds. So let's go ahead and suppress those. And maybe in this case, I want to bring in some new handholds, just bring in that subassembly that someone else on my team has been working on, see how that would fit in with the changes I made. I definitely like that. So I'll go ahead and make a checkpoint with those added in. So that'll be for our higher design. Go ahead and call that the passenger seat high. Right. And then from that point, you can branch off of that passenger seat design. You can keep making changes. Again, all starting from the pre-modified version of the model. So you can take a look at the pre-modified checkpoint, see the geometry that we started with there, and then go back and do that for any checkpoint. This could be during a design review. We're going through and looking at our driver seat 1, showing the changes that we made between that to driver seat 2, and then do the same thing down to driver seat 3. So if you're reviewing this with the team, it's very useful for going through and clearly showing the changes that were made between each iteration that you worked with, the thought process with each of those. It's all being captured right from within that exploration session. So one configuration might have only taken 10 minutes to create. Another one might have taken multiple days to build out, but you could save all that off. And then once we're happy with one of those iterations, you're able then to accept those changes, build that session, and then we're just right back in the standard Creo parametric environment. But one thing to note as well is that anytime you could go right back into that session and work with those iterations, and you always do have reference back to that session as well. Right. So that really covers everything that I wanted to show from a demonstration perspective. And again, I'll give it a moment just in case there's any type of questions that anyone has based off of this. And while you're typing that in, I do want to just briefly go through some of the value that this really is giving to a ton of people that are working with this. First and foremost, be creative. Try whatever you want. Move certain things around, try out a new set of wheels, add, delete parts, mess with the colors. You don't have to leave any stone unturned. You're probably not going to use every single design change that you try out, but that's the idea, right? Once you go through and find what you like, there's no doubt that it's the right one because you've gone through multiple different iterations to get to that point. Really helps with your design reviews. Just go back and show every step of the process that you took to get to where you got today, right? So that's really the idea of using design exploration. You don't have to save off a bunch of different copies. It's just all laid out right there for you within one strong, streamlined session.
Nice, Paul. Nicely done, buddy. So we do have a question in our Q&A. Questions are coming in. So first question is, how are the different assembly files stored and managed to make this possible?
Yeah, so it's not building out the new files per se. So what the design exploration session does is it works with what's called a .tmu file, which essentially is just a list of instructions essentially that it tells the assembly to take. So it's not building out necessarily new files based off of any of that. It's really just working with that one .tmu file that gets stored in with the top level assembly or the model that you're working with. So that's just what you would work with from the part perspective. It's always just referencing back to that TMU file.
And when sending sending that file or part to be manufactured, there's no confusion if there's those TMU files. There's a Creo distinguishes which is the intended file end result of your part, as opposed to the other TMU files and iterations.
Yep.
Cool. Is there a method to strip references or strip refs? I think that's references.
I have to see exactly what you're talking about there. Maybe want to expand a little bit upon.
Yeah, if you could expand a little bit, that would be good. Good question. What happens should we check into Windchill?
Yeah, so again, the TMU file is essentially just going to be tied to whatever the part or the top level assembly that you're working with is. So it's just going to be more or less treated similar to like what metadata would be, but it'll just be associated to that top level part or assembly that you're checking in. So it'd just be part of that, say, WT part that you're bringing over into Windchill.
Cool. Removing the references. So basically the stripping the references, that would be to the CMV. It says remove references to the CMV rather.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of confusion on that one. It might be something that might be worth following up on just to see exactly what you're referencing. I might not be well equipped to answer that right now.
Yeah, we'll reach out to you and we'll get some more clarification and get that figured out. Can I combine changes from different branches?
That's a good question. And I know over in Onshape, there's a very similar functionality where you're essentially merging in changes. And that's actually something that is coming with the Creo Plus, right? There's a certain type of collaboration that you can do there. Within design exploration, I'm not so sure exactly how you would merge per se, the different paths that you go down. So that might be something actually that gets touched on more so with a Creo Plus type application, is not only building out the different branches, but then merging some of the different design paths back in. So that one might be worth a follow up as well. I have to see exactly if that's something that the design exploration session is capable of, or if you do want to go more so into the route of what we're working with going forward with Creo Plus.
Okay.
Might be a better use case for that one.
Okay. And what happens if you come back to a previous version and models that are being referenced have changed, making constraints no longer viable?
It would just show you a warning, right? It would show you a warning that you have to go back and redefine what you went through and built out. So let me think on the exact use case that would be happening. So you go into a previous version and models that are being referenced have changed. So essentially the models that you're going into the session with have changed. Yeah, so it would essentially just throw you a warning and you can go back and redefine that or build out a new type of reference. So it would really be no different than if you checked them out, if you say you check in a new version of a model back into the Creo session and something that you built off of it had changed. It would pretty much be the same exact type of method that you would take just in normal Creo. You just go through and redefine that reference or redefine that mate or constraint.
Gotcha. Next question was, this is all done on a local server, not in the cloud, correct?
Yep, that is correct.
Yeah, there is a Creo Plus version that is coming out soon, which will be a cloud CAD solution for Creo. But right now, Creo is all on your local server or your workstation. In the past, there's a question. In the past, I've done this with family instances. The problem is Windchill disallowing the deletion of old unused members. Can the TPU branches ever be deleted after the first check-in?
It's a good question. It's a little bit more on the Windchill side, which I don't work as much with. So I'd have to check in on that and see if there's a difference there from what you did in the past with the family instances.
Yeah, let me find that out, because I can ask our Windchill guys that question and get that answered. Excellent. Well, I want to thanks for being on today, everyone. Appreciate the questions, appreciate the interaction. I hope that you definitely saw some value in this webinar. Our next webinar is going to be on the 25th of May. Next week we'll be at LiveWorks, PTC LiveWorks in Boston. And the 25th of May, we're going to show you guys Creo 10. So we're going to go over the capabilities, what's new with Creo 10, and we're also going to demo a few capabilities, some of the new functionality and capabilities. Cool. So thanks again for being on, everyone. If you have any other questions or anything you think of later, you can reply to the webinar invitation that I sent you. That'll come directly to me, or you can email us at info@3hti.com, or you can call us at 866-624-3484. So thanks, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks where we will be bringing you Creo 10. Thanks again.